estimating CO2 emissions from burning gasoline, part 2. Now, part 1 was the intro. Part 2, we're going to get into actually doing the problems. So we know that burning 1 gallon of gas produces roughly 19.8 pounds of CO2. So how can we write that as a unit fraction? Well, we know that 1 gallon of gas is the same as 19.8 pounds of CO2. Or, remember that we can also flip that around and say 19.8 pounds is 1 gallon of gas. So it really depends on which way we're dealing with that, like what way do we need it. So let's play. If you use 30 gallons of gas each week to drive to school, how much CO2 is emitted by your commute? Now, if you're trying to find how much CO2, that means that we're going to be using the 19.8 pounds over 1 gallon of gas. And I know we're going to use it like that because I need my final answers to be in pounds of CO2. We also know that we're starting with 30 gallons. So if I use 30 gallons of gas, just over 1, and I multiply that by 19.8 pounds per 1 gallon, when you're dealing with dimensional analysis, you have to make sure that your units line up appropriately. So which way are these working? Well, if you look at this, we know that the gallons are going to cancel out numerator to denominator, and I multiply straight across. So you would be emitting 594 pounds of CO2 each week on your commute. Number 3. If the tank of a car holds 40 liters of gasoline, how many pounds of CO2 are produced by burning an entire tank of gas? All right, so hopefully you're like, okay, I'm starting with 40 liters, and I hope alarm bells go off because we know that our CO2 is 19.8 pounds per 1 gallon. So that means I need to change liters to gallons. Well, what do we know about liters in terms of conversion factors? Well, I know that 1 quart is the same as 0.9464 liters. So that right there makes my liters go away. Now I'm in quarts. And that's fine, but that's not where I want to be. So then I say, well, I know that 4 quarts is the same as 1 gallon. So that right there takes me out of quarts, right? Or canceling out numerator to denominator, and now I'm in gallons. So now that I'm in gallons, now I can put the 19.8 pounds over 1 gallon. So that makes the gallons go away. And I'm in pounds the way I want to. So now we have numbers in the numerator and the denominator. So I'm going to start with numerator divided by, right? Because if it's in the bottom, we divide. And you can just type it into your calculator just like this. Still in the bottom, so still dividing by 4. We're back to the top, so we multiply by 19.8. So 40 divided by 0.9464 divided by 4 times 19.8 gives me 209 pounds of CO2. Number 4, if a car gets 26 miles to the gallon on average, how much CO2 is emitted into the atmosphere when that car travels 100 miles? Okay, so 26 miles to the gallon. So that means 26 miles per 1 gallon. I know that we're talking about CO2, so I have 19.8 pounds per 1 gallon. And I know I have 100 miles. So these are my 3 ratios. But remember, ratios, we can flip them, right? Any of these can be flipped. Sometimes I find it easier to work backwards. So the question is how much CO2, which is in pounds. So I know my last one has to be pounds over gallons. So that takes out the last one. To work backwards, I know that I'm going to need gallons in the numerator so that my gallons cancel out. So that means this is the only 26 miles over 1 gallon is the only other ratio that has gallons. So I'm going to flip it. I'm going to put 1 gallon on the top and 26 miles in the denominator because, again, that makes my units of gallons disappear. And then how do I make miles disappear? Well, I just have my 100 miles over 1, and that makes the miles disappear. So now I have the units that I want. So I take 100 divided by 26 times 19.8, and I end up with a beautiful answer of roughly 76 pounds of CO2. And I'm just rounding here. You might have to round differently. Pay attention to your unit or to the directions. Number 5, if a car gets 30 miles per gallon on average, how much CO2 is emitted per mile? Same basic idea here. We have a 30 miles per gallon. We're talking CO2, which is 19.8 pounds per 1 gallon. So you also have to pay attention. CO2 is emitted. You have to know that that means 19.8 pounds per 1 gallon. And then it says emitted per mile. That's 1 mile. So that last problem, we talked about 100 miles. This problem, we're talking about 1 mile. But the setup is going to look the same. 1 mile over 1 times 1 gallon over 30 miles, because that process right there makes the miles go away. And then the last step here, 19.8 pounds over 1 gallon, because then again, the gallons disappear. So I'm going to take 1 divided by 30 times 19.8, and I end up with 0.66 pounds for every mile. That's per 1 mile. Number 6, 2 more to go. A landscaper finds that his riding mower uses 1.8 gallons of gas per hour when he is mowing at a medium speed. If it takes him 3.5 hours to mow a 4-acre lot, how many pounds of CO2 emissions are caused by mowing this lot? Okay, what do we know? We know 1.8 gallons per hour, so 1.8 gallons per 1 hour. We know 3.5 hours, 3.5 hours to mow a 4-acre lot. That's fine. And we know CO2 emissions, which is 19.8 pounds per 1 gallon. Okay, so this is the information. These are the 3 ratios that I know. I'm going to start backwards because, again, I'm trying to find how many pounds. So I know that the 19.8 pounds over 1 gallon is the final one. Then I need to go and say, okay, I need the one that has the gallons in it. So I'm going to put 1.8 gallons over 1 hour. Makes my gallons go away. And then I have my 3.5 hours over 1. Makes the hours go away. So I'm going to have 3.5 times 1.8 times 19.8 equals 124.74 pounds of CO2. So again, think about what you have. It might help to write down what you know, and then you can go from there. Okay, the last one. Which is more environmentally friendly? That means the least amount of CO2, right? If we're talking environmentally friendly, that means the least amount of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere. So we're looking at a 32 mile per gallon rated Toyota or a 14.7 kilometer per liter rated Volkswagen. All right, so let's start with option A here. So if we have 32 miles in 1 gallon, and we want to say, well, what if, so let's just say 1 mile. Okay, so if these guys are going to just drive 1 mile, how much CO2 do they produce? Because we need something to compare nicely, right? So for this Volkswagen, if I have 1 mile over 1, then I would say, well, that means put 32 miles on the bottom, 1 gallon on the top, and then 19.8 pounds over 1 gallon on the bottom, right? Because miles cancels out, gallons cancels out, and I'm left in pounds. So if I take 1 divided by 32 times 19.8, I end up with 0.61875 pounds per mile. Okay, great. That's part A. Part B. This one, I have 14.7 kilometers per liter. So not only am I in kilometers per liter, like I need to change kilometers to miles, I need to change liters to gallons. So let's do that first. I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to do 14.7 kilometers over 1 liter. So I know that I can take kilometers, 1 mile. 1 mile goes on the top. Sorry, I could not find my notes that I was looking at. Is 1.6093 kilometers. Okay, so that takes up my kilometers. I'm in miles, right? Because remember, I want to be in miles per gallon. That way we can easily compare it to the Toyota. All right, so how do I get out of liters now? So for liters, I would do the 0.9464 liters is the same as 1 quart, and then 4 quarts is 1 gallon. So that makes me out of quarts, gets me out of liters, and now my unit is miles per gallon. So I multiply, take 14.7 divided by 1.6093 times 0.9464 times 4, and that gives me 34.58 miles per gallon. And honestly, at this point, maybe I should have done this first. If this is the same as let's just say 34.6 miles per gallon, I don't even really need to find how much CO2. I kind of wasted time there. I could just compare my Toyota to my Volkswagen. The Volkswagen gets more miles per gallon. That means it's going to produce less CO2. And if you don't trust me, to do the math here, if we'd say, okay, 1 mile, then I would take 34.6 miles and 1 gallon in the numerator, and then 19.8 pounds over 1 gallon. All right, same process here. Makes my gallons go away, makes my miles go away. So we would take 1 divided by 34.6 times 19.8. And when you do that, you get roughly 0.57-ish pounds per mile. So you're producing the least amount of CO2. You're less CO2 per mile than the Toyota. So in this case, the Volkswagen is the winner in terms of what is more environmentally friendly.